Okay, hi. So we are carrying on, continuing our learning of Shaar Yichud Ve Emunah, and the underlining learning that we're doing is how is it that Hashem, who, as another beautiful teacher of Chassidus, Mrs. Stirner Ginsburg, explained, how do you put an ocean into a water bottle? Like, how do we take the infiniteness of Hashem and merge that and match that in with the finite created world? So in the last edition of this learning, we were talking about the attribute of Malchus, how when we're looking at the Shema, when we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that is actually referring, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad is referring to an aspect of Hashem whose upper unification. Hashem's reality is unified in the upper worlds. And then when we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto, he has a unity in the lower worlds, in the created world. And we were trying to understand how all this makes sense. And what we were talking about last week is we were talking about the aspect of Malchus, how Malchus is able to be connected to Hashem in Hashem's essence, in an undifferentiated way, an aspect of, there's an aspect of godliness that is merged with Hashem, the way Hashem is in his name Havaya, that transcends creation. And then there's an aspect of Hashem that is able to, through the aspect of Malchus, be able to relate to the world within the dimensions of time and space. And that's a lower level of unity of Hashem and his creation called Yechida Tata, and the first level of unification of Hashem and the creation is Yechida Ila'a. So we spoke about that last week, and I'm not going to go over it all again. Just that this aspect of Malchus that is connected to Yechida Ila'a is a part of Malchus that transcends the world. It identifies, so to speak, with the aspect of Hashem that transcends the world. And then there's another part of Malchus that can relate. It's the one aspect of Hashem, so to speak, of all his multitude of different dimensions and midot that can relate and transcend into the lower world and relate to the creation of the lower world and the ability of Hashem to contract into limits of time and space and practical and tangible reality. So we were speaking about that last week and speaking about the nature of Malchus to be able to navigate these two different dimensions of being, so to speak. So, and then we said creation is really a process by which Hashem becomes the universe. Malchus is when this godly energy assumes the properties of the universe and its diverse features. So that's what we were speaking about last week, and it was a beautiful and interesting learning. And now we are moving on. Okay, so where are we moving on to? So we're moving on to what Chaim Miller calls the addendum to chapter 7, which is a part that was originally meant to be in a different part of Tanya. When the Alter Rebbe originally wrote the Tanya, he wrote the Tanya in different pamphlets and manuscripts, which then got put together and put into a printed book. And in the first 29 printings of that Tanya, what we're going to learn right now was left out. And the reason that it was left out is that at the time of the Alter Rebbe, well, we know he was thrown in jail because of opponents to his philosophy, who we call Mitnagdim, because they were mitnaged, they were against what he was teaching. So in this part of what we're going to be learning today, Chaim Miller explains, and the Alter Rebbe addresses who he considers to be Kabbalists who got it wrong. So when we traditionally think about Mitnagdim, we could think that they were literalists, they weren't Kabbalistic, that they didn't learn the Torah of the Arizl or the teachings of the Arizl. But the way Chaim Miller explains is actually they were into the mystical realms of Torah, and they did study the Alter Rebbe's Torah, but they studied it and understood it in a different way to which the Baal Shem Tov understood it, and the way the Baal Shem Tov understood it was passed on to the Maggid of Mezrich, and then the Alter Rebbe is writing on the basis of what he learned from his teacher, the Maggid's son, and what he understood to be the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. And that is, and all of the difference of opinion is, how do we define what Tzimzum is? And it seems to be that the machloket, the difference of opinion, was in the fact that the Alter Rebbe explains that, or let's say the Arizl explains that in order to create a world, Hashem had to withdraw an aspect of his being, and in that empty space, so to speak, where he had pulled back an aspect of his being, in that empty space, a world came into being. And then now this is, and how these terms are really understood is what creates the difference of opinion between the Mitnagdim and the Hasidim. So let's say the Arizal is saying that in order for Hashem to create a world, or you could even imagine it as a parent, if a parent is tremendously overbearing, then it's hard for the child to find space to assert its independence and its identity and its personality. So according to everyone, the Alter Rebbe kind of did a contraction, the Arizal explaining that Hashem did a contraction of his presence and left some kind of a, let's just call it a vacated space for now. And then into that space, he then created the world. So the way that I'm understanding it, it seems that the machloket is how to explain this Tzimzum. So the Alter Rebbe believes that anybody who can think that Hashem actually withdrew totally his presence and left an empty space is not understanding the nature of Hashem correctly and doesn't understand the nature of creation correctly. That the way the Baal Shem Tov explains the Arizal is that when Hashem did the Tzimzum, the Tzimzum, and he contracted himself, the way he also reinvests himself into the world is different than the ways that the opposition understand it. So what I think, and this is really me doing my best to understand it, what I think I understand is the following. According to the others, the Vilna Gaon being chief among them, Hashem takes himself out of the space, and then from a distance, he creates a world into this kind of vacuumous space, and he himself is not fully present in that world. He's sending an aspect of himself in that world to inhabit creation, and from a distance, he is supervising that creation, he is directing that creation, he's guiding that creation, but he is not in the mud, so to speak, in the nitty-gritty, in the sticks and stones of the physical world. In fact, there's a quote from the Vilna Gaon that says that they, being the Hasidim, are similar even to the worshippers of the golden calf, because they think God's presence can be found in the sticks and the stones, that the sticks and the stones are like God. And by him, the Vilna Gaon, this is heretical. And because he believed it was heretical, he believed that the Hasidim should be fought with every passion and every capacity to fight them. The way that I understand the difference is that Hashem could not have vacated himself totally from any space, because how could Hashem pull himself away from space? Because that would mean that he has a body that can be here and not there, which would contradict the basic identity of what Hashem is. He can't be here, not there, because he doesn't have a body, number one. And number two, and this is the part that has the greater import and significance for us, number two is that Hashem takes the Tzimzum, the way I understand it to be, the way I understand the Arizl explaining it to be, is that Hashem takes the incredible multidimensionality of himself and he limits it, and he limits it, and he limits it. In other words, he's making it more finite, more dense. Let's say if you talk about vibrations, higher up the vibrations are high frequency, and he's going like the same way water can go from gas to water to ice. Hashem and everything that he is, his being is moving through a step down process, and his being, through what we explained last week, is this capacity of Malchus. There's an aspect of himself that even though he transcends time and space and direction and everything, there's an aspect of him that can take on the boundaries and the borders of time and space and finite reality. And then he can invest himself, his very expansive self, into a finite and many finite containers. So he is the same, and he is getting contracted through this aspect of Malchus in the lower worlds. Him in the higher worlds is not contracted, but there comes this transitional space through the attribute of Malchus where he can take on the guise, the garment, so to speak, of contraction, of limitations to time and space, and then he occupies in the lower world time and space. But the Alter Rebbe says, Chas Ve Shalom, to think that he is not in every rock and not in every stick and not in every physical creation, completely and wholesomely and absolutely. So if we look at some of these beautiful quotes, like quotes from the Baal Shem Tov himself, and the Baal Shem Tov's work was called Savas HaRivash, which was actually burnt at some point. But the teaching is that one should be so conscious of our Creator. The whole earth is full of his glory, quoting from Isaiah, and the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is constantly at your side. Look at the Shekhinah next to you as you would look at physical objects. When you look at anything at all, a stick or a stone, or absolutely any created thing, you should see godliness in that object. Whereas, what is the Vilna Gaon say? The Vilna Gaon says something completely different to that. What does the Vilna Gaon say? He's criticizing. He's criticizing, and he's saying something completely different. So let me just find what he's saying and read it to you, because the quote of it is very dramatic, and it's interesting to see how he differentiates from what the teachings are, that we understand to be the teachings of Hasidus. So let me just try to find it here. I'm sorry that it's, I thought I had it right there, but it's not too far. Yeah. So So first of all, the Gaon says, anyone who's called a Jew whose heart is touched by fear of Hashem, it is incumbent upon him to repulse them, that means the followers of the Baal Shem Tov, and persecute them with every kind of persecution and subjugate them whenever the hand of a Jew can reach. Now, why did he feel this so strongly? So he felt this so strongly because he thought that they really, here. The Gaon wrote that Hasidim misinterpret the Torah and proclaim of every stick and every stone, these are your gods, Israel, which are words proclaimed by the worshippers of the golden calf. And that's what he was saying. That was the basis of why he was opposing the Hasidim, because also they felt that to say that God's holy presence is present in the lowest aspect of the mundane world is almost like an insult to God's presence. God is transcendent. God is holy. God is so, in a way, I don't want to say pristine, but it's not covered to him and to what we think about him to say that he's present in every stick and every stone and every, puddle of mud and raindrops. But for the Hasidim, the opposite is true, that to understand Tzimzum correctly, you have the absoluteness of God being everything. And then because Hashem has this capacity to, and what we've explained so many times, because of his kindness, because of his want and desire to have this lower world, he contracts, he manifests Gevurah, which is really kindness, but he himself is still in that space. It's just coming and looking differently. It's looking like it's in the boundaries of time and space, but there's nothing of his essence that's not still there. So of course he would be found in the sticks and the stones. So because they felt that this was not the case, they felt that the Hasidim are insulting God, believing sticks and stones to be God itself, whereas we say God is in those sticks and stones. God is revealed just in a very compacted and contracted way, but God is, those sticks and stones couldn't exist if God wasn't in them, but just in a very dense way, dense vibration, so to speak. So that's the difference between the Mitnagdim and the Hasidim, not to make that mistake that they didn't study Kabbalah, they just understood it differently. So originally, when the Alter Rebbe published the Tanya, he left all of this out, and only after the 29 printings, it was then put in when they reprinted things in Vilna, and I have a date when that happened, in 1900, then it got put in here at the end of chapter 7. So, so there. Okay. So, let me see if there's anything here that I didn't want to tell you, that I wanted to tell you that I didn't tell you. So the belief that God is supervising through Hashgacha Pratis a world, but that he's not part of that world, is not the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. Teaching of the Baal Shem Tov is he's in the world and he's not separate from the world. And he knows everything that's going on with the world because he is right there. And he knows what's going on in the world because every part of the world is an extension of him, like my own hand is an extension of me, and my foot and my toe. I'm not supervising them from a distance. I am them, and they are me. So the tzavas rivash, the tzava ha-rivash, that's what I quoted to you now, was written by was early compilations of teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. They were publicly burned. Because the Hasidim were saying everything in the universe contains holy sparks, contains this godliness. And so, okay. So let's see, did I leave anything out? I'm looking at all my notes and it looks like I've said everything. And then proofs that Tzimzum is not literal, that God doesn't have a body that I explained to you. He cannot remove it from one place to another because he's not bound by place in his essence. And God knows everything, knows all things about this lowly world because in it, everything is extension of himself. He and his knowledge are one. We spoke about that last week. And it says in the Tikkun Zohar, no place is devoid of him, neither in the higher worlds or the lower worlds. So that's very beautiful. So no place is devoid of him, even in the lower worlds. Now, in the Zohar, and the Tanya now quotes a piece from the Zohar, and it discusses this idea in more detail, and then we'll discuss the quote from the Zohar. It says in the Zohar, Raya Mehemna, which means faithful shepherd. That's a section of the Zohar, but it's also literally means a faithful shepherd. So Moshe was a Raya Mehemna. Our tzaddikim are often called Raya Mehemna. So in the portion of Pinchas, it is written, he grasps all, but none grasp him. He encompasses all worlds, and nothing departs outside his domain. He fills all worlds. He binds and unites one form to another, upper and lower, and there's no interaction between the four elements without the presence of the Blessed Holy One in them. End of quote from the Zohar. So now the Tanya actually goes through these quotes and kind of discusses each one. So he grasps all, but none can grasp him. So earlier we said that even the celestial angelic creations cannot grasp really this conundrum, like to use Stirner Ginsburg's example, how the ocean fits into the water bottle. It's hard to grasp. The way in which God fills the worlds is not like the way the soul fills the body. So even though the soul is kind of grasped by the body and it's influenced by the body and it feels the pain of the body and the injuries of the body and it kind of is affected by the body, the Tanya says this is not what it is like for Hashem, because Hashem is unchanged in relation to the world. Summer or winter, day or night, he is not grasped by the world, even though he fills the world. So the quote says he grasps all, but none grasp him. God is not influenced by the world, the soul, as the soul is influenced, so to speak, by the body. Then the next quote in the Zohar is he encompasses all worlds. Nothing departs outside his domain. So what does that mean? So the Zohar refers to Hashem, and Chaim Miller uses this idea of light and energy. When we're talking about Hashem, he's sort of talking about Hashem as light and energy. And then it's in a way easier for us to actually relate to what we're talking about, because Hashem is an abstract notion for us, but we can sort of grasp the idea of energy and we can kind of grasp the idea of light. So the Zohar refers to Hashem's light and energy as something that encompasses all worlds. Thus, we have a relationship to it. Also, so let's say Hashem's energy is encompassing the worlds. Hashem's thought of an object is in fact the same energy which sustains its existence. Yesh mi'ayin. The chair only exists because Hashem thinks about it. Therefore, he encompasses it. It is encompassed by him. So I'm going to explain this. I understand that that is not very clear. I'm going to explain it in a minute. And he fills all worlds. How does this energy, this immanent light, that's immanent but diminished, influence and create the world that it fills? So really, to explain these last two words, we have to talk about or makif and or Panimi, it's not Panimi, it's Or Makif and Or Mamale. There's a kind of light that is Hashem's light that surrounds, and this light is an aspect of Hashem's light that doesn't have to constrict itself into particulars. It's a surrounding light. It's a encompassing light. It's a very, I don't want to say generic light, but it doesn't have to be particular. It's kind of a embracing, encompassing light. So that's Or Makif, surrounding light. And then there's another light of Hashem that fills into each object. If you imagine each object through Hashem's articulations, through the Aleph Beis, through all the Tzimzum, Hashem manages to constrict his energy in such a way that certain things are created and they containers, so to speak, but Hashem's light and energy fills that container. So while it's encompassing, Hashem's light doesn't have particularly identified energy, let's say, identified and connected to detail. It's not differentiated, but when it's filling the container, then it's finite and it's distinct to that container. So it's filling the world and it's encompassing the world. So that's what it means by it fills. He binds and unites one form to another, up and lower. No interaction between the four elements without the presence of the Blessed Holy One are in them. So the whole earth is full of his glory, said Isaiah. The Shekhinah is constantly at your side. Oh, I read that to you already. Okay, so let's see the rest of the Zohar. I'm going to just read directly from Chaim Miller's explanations because my prep got up to that point. So let's see. None can grasp him. He fills all worlds. And then, so Hashem did not make a direct transition from the light energy, which encompasses the worlds, to the energy that fills all worlds in their present condition. He first produced the intermediary phase. We spoke about that. That's the Malchus, which was the source of the energy which now fills into each container, so to speak. There's the container. In the intermediate phase, the divine light energy was diminished in the direction of the world's limitations, but it was not diminished enough to power all the detailed creations found in the universe. The intimate phase in the energy of the 10 created statements of Genesis, an immanent fills all worlds type of energy, which was still not sufficiently diminished and differentiated to power the detailed world as we know it. For the breath of his, so you know what, I'm not going to continue because I didn't prepare the rest, and I'm going to stop there. I think that's fine for now, and we will continue on this quote of the Zohar. But basically, what we've been doing today, summary of today, is understanding the difference of opinion between the Mitnagdim and the Hasidim, the idea that it's not to the Hasidim insulting that Hashem is found in the lower worlds in an undiluted way, just a constricted way. Constricted, contained, contracted does not mean diluted or diminished. So he's contracted. It is a kind of diminishment because he's hidden, so to speak, but his presence is there. It's just hidden in its contracted form. Whereas the Mitnagdim were saying that that's heretical to believe that Hashem is really in every created thing. And then looking at the quote of the Zohar, talking about these different attributes of Hashem, of how he's filling in the worlds, and there's no part of the world that's not him, and all of that. So we will continue with that next time. So thank you so much.